I don't know how you say it in English, actually, to be honest, but I'm sure it's like Ruin Naranda, probably something like that. It's like, it was an 8-hour drive from Montreal, and here we are.
Is this just for pleasure?
No, my boyfriend is like, has 3 shows right now up in this area. So I was singing with him and playing guitar on some of the songs. And so last night was the first show, and then we have tonight off, and then tomorrow in a place called Val d'Or, like Val d'Or. And the last show is in a place called La Sarre. So, and then we go back to Montreal and pick up his dog, and then we drive another 10 hours. So it'll be 8 hours back to his house, then 10 hours to my house after.
How big are the shows up there? Do a lot of people come out?
My boyfriend, who has like an established career here in this province in particular, because he's Quebecois and he sings in French, and his show's situation in this province in particular is different than mine, because he's used to playing here and people know him, and they can range, I don't know what the size is like typically, but like, I mean, depending if it's a festival or whatever, it can be anywhere from like 100 people to 400 or 500, whatever. Like I don't really know actually, but I will say that like in Quebec, it's got a very good scene for the Quebec musicians here. Because I sing mostly in English, I haven't really explored a lot of the Francophone regions here. So other than Montreal, Quebec City, and a few other places, like I haven't really played that much as my project. So my shows are a little different. Montreal, I usually play, I think I would be comfortable saying like a 200 capacity for me is good, is nice. Like I like, but it's been a while. Like, I don't know what my last one was. I can't remember very much of since before the last year and a half. And then now the shows are picking up again here. They started like at quarter of the capacity, and then now it's like half capacity. It's going back up slowly. There's obviously different size venues. I just don't know that much about the regions.
You're fairly well known in Canada generally, but is Montreal almost like entering a new country?
Well, I wouldn't say Montreal, the city. The city is like not so drastic, but I think that when you leave Montreal and you go into other regions of Quebec, it definitely feels, it has a definite, I find, I mean, some people might say I'm wrong. I feel like it's different than the rest of Canada, but I find as I've toured Canada for years, I do find that depending on where you are, it feels different. Like the West Coast feels different than the East Coast. So like, it's not that crazy to think that Quebec, because of the nature of that province and like how I think like the Francophone Quebecois people are, you know, they have a different thing going on than like Anglophone West Coast. Well, actually, you know, there's parts of Canada that maybe have the same concerns as like a lot of people in Quebec, you know, in terms of what they do out there and preserving, you know, their cultures and stuff. So I don't really know. I don't know enough about it, but I do find that it does sometimes feel like different areas that you go into in Quebec I do feel definitely a little bit of a difference than when I'm home. But I feel a little bit different when I go from New Brunswick to Nova Scotia. So I think I notice a little difference actually now, but I don't know why. And I don't know if that's actually valid. Like it's all like the only place that in Quebec where you really notice like, oh, okay, is like when you go into old Quebec City and old Montreal, like it obviously has a more European vibe, you know, because it was built a long time ago and the buildings, the architecture is really noticeably different. So there's that physical aspect, but yeah, I do enjoy touring in Quebec. Like I find a lot of people make like, it's like really like the people are really, really friendly and they make a lot of jokes and people like to talk. It's like really like, it's nice. I don't know. It's a little different. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of if there would be an analog in the States, you know, of being sort of like known, like a known quantity in the country, but they're just being like a strip of it where it's just, you know, almost like, again, like a foreign country.
Well, I will say that the Quebec, like I do find that there is an industry here in terms of like, especially the Francophone artists and maybe even the Anglophone ones, like the industry in Quebec is really, they're really, really supportive of the art. And so theater and, you know, film and music and dance. And so I do find there's a lot of funding and you do see that that is a really nice thing, I think, for all the artists. So that I do find that has a lot of support. I mean, Canada in general also does.
I was going to say, yeah. compared to the States, certainly in terms, you've got CanCon there is part of it, but then beyond that, just the fact that you have grants for the arts makes you completely different than the US.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you've sung in French before.
Yeah, I do. I have, I put out an album in French like in 2001, but I've also put I have put like random French songs throughout the years on certain albums. And I actually have been writing right now. I was just going over, I have 3 on the go. I'm trying to put together maybe an EP in French, hopefully more than an EP, but right now I have 3 that are pretty well almost done. And then, so then that's kind of a newer project that I just started. Like, I really want to get that done. Yeah. So I have sung in French, and, when I sing with my boyfriend, it's all in French. And we made an album during part of the sort of the lockdown period or the confinement period. And, where it's coming out in April. And so it's half, like half in French, half in English, but it's a duo. So it's like both of us are singing throughout. But yeah, so there's definitely, that's a strong desire for me, is to sing more in French moving forward, for sure. Like to keep it kind of equal.
Performing with him, is that part of what influenced you to put out this EP?
Well, I think a little bit. It's partly that, also partly right now, I'm living in a francophone. I'm living in like a French village, like an Acadian village, like, which is like 20 minutes from where I grew up. I grew up in a city that was like 40% francophone and 60% anglophone. So I have a house now 20 minutes from there. And I think when I moved there, I started speaking French all the time, everywhere I was going, like in the town and my neighbors and stuff. And I also work part-time at a swimming pool as a lifeguard, and in the town called Dieppe, and it's French. And so everyone I speak to, well, there are Anglophones who come to the pool, but most of the time it's in French, and all my bosses and my staff are all in French that I work with. I started just talking in French all the time, and I started listening to a lot of like Radio Canada, which is the CBC, it's the French CBC. Now that and my boyfriend's totally French, like he only really started speaking English when he met me, or he didn't before. Yeah, so I think because I speak so much French now, and I think now I really have a desire to like make more recordings in French, which I always did before, but I would inevitably write more in English because I would have a partner that was Anglophone, and I'd speak more English around the house and now I'm doing the opposite. So I think also just like, I really like singing in both languages. So
that day to day, it's those conversations that you're having that have a really heavy influence on lyric writing.
I honestly think that's where it's coming from. I don't like to use the word honestly because everything I'm saying should be honest. I think it is influenced by my day to day. And my daughter goes to school in French too. So all the emails and interactions are all in French. So I think because I'm listening to so much French radio and French music, and I'm really just want to sing more. And also because I was singing in my boyfriend's band before the pandemic, or just before, and it was all in French. And I just kind of want to do more of that. But it's pretty genuine desire. It's not like I think it's just coming out of like the fact that it's influenced by my day to day, as you said.
When you say singing in his band, you mean you're not playing any instruments?
Yeah. So he has his project's called Danny Placard, and he started out kind of more in folk, and then he started to move a little bit more like, I guess, rock, if you will. And then like the last few records he's made were a little more like on the psychedelic side. And the band for that was like, pretty big band and with keyboards and like all keyboards from pre 1972 kind of thing. And like just that, our keyboard player in that band is amazing.
Analog synthesizers.
Well, yeah, like whatever Leandre has going on. I haven't, like, he's got stuff that I don't necessarily understand what it all is. And yeah, in that project, I just sing and play tambourine and shakers. I love it. It's, that was something I've always had this fantasy or dream of, like being a background singer. And so I really enjoy doing this. And then right now we're here doing 3 shows just up in the north, and I'm singing, but also accompanying on guitar for that. It's just as a duo. So just because not everyone was available to do the show, so he was going to do it solo, and so I am playing guitar in that. But I've often dreamed of just singing without an instrument. I mean, I love playing guitar, but
I had Mary Clayton on the show Obviously, she's put out her own records, but is best known as a backup singer, and it's not really something that exists that much anymore. Seems to, I guess, unless you're the Rolling Stones or something, there probably aren't that many opportunities to just be singing with somebody on stage.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few bands. I don't know about everyone, but I do find lately I've been noticing in Canada, like where there's room. I have been seeing, like, I just saw footage of some friends the other day, and they had two women singing on stage, and so like Bahamas was doing that for also, and I feel like Weather Station had maybe the same two singers on stage with like at one point, but I'm not sure. I feel like I remember that happening. And I think that, I don't know, I think that is something that comes in maybe if there's budget that allows or space, or maybe more bands are exploring it, like not necessarily huge bands, but I honestly don't know. I haven't even really thought about that much lately. Like, I haven't thought about anything, to be honest. I feel like my brain has just been like, phew. I wrote someone an email the other day. I was like, had to answer something, and I had to like make a decision on something. And I said that it seems like my brain is full and empty all at the same time. Like, I can't, like, it seems too full to focus on anything.
It's too full to gain any additional information.
Yeah. And I also can't go deep. Like, if I'm trying to make a decision on a subject matter to talk about, so it's like, I can't even, like, if somebody asks me to pick like my 10 like influential albums, or 10, or like, for example, I was just asked today to come up with like 10 or 12 songs that I want to, like, that I've been listening to or whatever. And like, just trying to go back and into that area and be like, well, what is some of the music that means a lot to me? Like, I can't, it just goes.
I always have that problem though. It's not just a pandemic thing. I can never answer that question when people either ask me like my all-time favorites or what I've been listening to lately.
I will agree that that's a lot of pressure. I'm like when you're doing a radio interview and somebody says like, or some interview where it's live, I should say, I find that really, all those like, what would be your desert island pick or whatever? You're like, what?
I think you feel obligated to have the exact best answer at that moment, and not the minute you leave the radio station regret not having picked something else.
Definitely. I also feel like I have a really terrible time with commitment in general. So when like the idea of committing to like getting married would be like a hard one, that kind of thing. And committing to that being the song that I would take with me as the only thing I could listen to or I could be like,
as though this were a real thing that could actually happen.
I know. It'd be like, oh, I didn't mean that one. I meant, the one that I would really like.
Just like one day into your desert island stage, just completely regretting your decision.
Yeah, that would be me for sure. Oh, well.
You've got an incredibly distinctive voice. I'm sure I'm not the first person to tell you that. When you're singing backup or in that kind of configuration, are you able to be yourself, or do you need to kind of perform?
That's a good question. So there's some moments where, like, let's say it's featuring more like a duet singing, then I can bring more my own character personality to it. When I'm just singing like ahs or oohs or whatever, I find that really challenging because I try to blend my voice in more and take the character out so that it's not about me, but that it's just filling the space of of that instrument or the notes or whatever. And that's interesting because I would say that maybe I'm not the best person for doing backing vocals when it comes to that, because I don't have like a super strong, stable voice in general. Like, I'm not like my vocal cords aren't the healthiest. So if I get all excited and the band is really loud and I'm not concentrating on like singing with like diaphragm support, or if I start singing into my vocal cords instead of like my resonant voice, which I only learned about in the last few years because I blew out my vocal cords over years of misuse kind of. I find if I get excited, then I'm not very professional. Like, I have to like be really careful. I can't talk before the show, and when I'm on tour with a band, if I'm doing that job. But if I'm just like singing, like if I'm singing in a quiet project and it's like just two voices singing, like for example, if I'm touring with Mount Eerie, like if I'm singing along with him, then I could just be my voice. And although I will say when I sing with him, I also try to blend my voice a bit with his and make it sound more like I find his voice, Phil of Mount Eerie, I find his voice always reminds me of like wood or something. Like, it reminds me of like trees somehow. So I try to like make my voice sound more like something that would be found in nature and less Like, because sometimes when I hear my own voice singing like on my own songs, I think, oh, it sounds so whiny. Like, why does it sound so whiny? And that's why. But then when I sing like with someone like Phil, I try to really, like, my voice tone just becomes different. And I think at first it was subconscious, but then I noticed like, oh, okay, I'm really singing a little differently when I sing with him. And so I think I do change depending on who I'm singing with. But I will say that when I'm singing in a band and just doing backing vocals that are like just notes, I find I try to blend in more. I don't want to it's not about me in that moment. It's not about me ever, probably. I should just.
Well, that's kind of the thing with Phil. I mean, I was listening to the two albums that the two of you put out and was thinking about probably, I don't want to say the challenge, but something that you have to be very mindful of when singing with him specifically is he's a pretty quiet singer and you have to not overpower him.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I think that I love about singing with Phil as well, because it allows me to have I can play more with the silences or the quiet tones. And I find I'm kind of at my best when I don't have to push my voice as much in a volume way. So I actually really love that, of singing those types of songs in that way with that tone.
Now, when you say blew out your vocal cords, is that a temporary thing?
No, I don't think I think it has the potential to be temporary. And I think it has the potential to get worse depending on how I behave. I think, so I will admit that off and on throughout my adult life, I did smoke cigarettes and then stop and start and stop. I say it hesitantly because I always hid it from my family, but now all my children know. We've talked about it. They know that I have that past, so now I can be honest about it.
How does that come? That's almost like confessional. Is that in attempting to tell them not to smoke, you admit that you have smoked?
It was more like I don't even know why we started talking about it. And I talked about it differently at different times with each child. I mean, 3 of my kids are adults now. And then my youngest is 8. So it happened, off and on, but I didn't smoke my first cigarette till I was like 26. So like, it's ridiculous that I ever started. And it was something that happened on tour, like after a show for fun, So I never smoked at home. I would go back home and stop. So I did this thing where I was constantly really messing with my vocal cords. Also, I never really properly learned how to sing anyway. Like, and I was singing like when I was in Eric's trip, sometimes really loud and so I never learned how to actually have the proper support to do it properly. And so I think through a result of like starting smoking and stopping smoking, sometimes I would stop for 2 years and then I would go back on tour and smoke. Depending on who the musicians were, then I would smoke. If there was no smokers around, then I would not smoke. And then the minute, like after you smoke like 3 days in a row, then my voice would be a mess, or it would be cooler. Sometimes it sounds better, which is also difficult to accept. Yeah. In terms of health. But now, so then what happened was I quit, and about a year and a half after I quit, when I knew I was done, I went to see my doctor, and because it was bad, like I was losing my voice on every tour, regardless of whether I was smoking or not. And they sent me to like a speech therapist to teach me how to just talk again. Like right now, I'm not talking properly. Like right now, I'm talking in my vocal cords. I'm not using my resonant voice. I should be, but I'm just a little tired, so I don't. And also the thing that goes along with touring, like you're up really late. If you drink alcohol, then you're drinking. You're talking after the show, you're selling merch, you're like, depending on how loud the house music is after where then you're speaking over that to sell the records or, talk to people. And it's really easy to lose your voice, or me anyway. And there's a bunch of other things like coffee is bad for your voice, like all these things that like the vocal hygiene is something that a lot of people don't learn about till after they need to learn, till the damage is done. So, but when I sleep well and I take care of myself and I'm healthy, then my voice is great. It's really easy to sing on tour on a regular basis without worrying. So I know what I have to do to maintain that. I just have to make sure that I actually do it. And that's the fun part.
I've never really considered that there was a proper way to speak. I mean, I say this as somebody who, at least for part of my job, speaks for a living. Is it like using your diaphragm the way they teach you?
Yeah, I think that goes into it, but it's also like speaking. So you want to be speaking up in here and not all in here. And so you'll notice sometimes when you hear people talking, it's very relaxed. Like they're speaking. Well, you like we spent a lot of time just learning how to say M sounds like, and then you can really hear the resonance. the vibration up in your nose and cheeks, instead of like all in here. You'll still feel some there. But yeah, it's interesting because sometimes now when I listen to people talking on audio, you really notice a difference. I can hear it. I'm not very good at doing it. Like when I get, because I grew up in a family where I'm always talking, like, yelling from room to room. And so I just, I'm not a natural at it.
I get the sense that you had this almost Lost Boys entry into music. There's that Steve Malcolmus song where he's, he's like singing about pavement at age 18, kidnapped by Turkish pirates, that song.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is like, I mean, not completely dissimilar from your situation of having joined this band at 18. And I guess like, how serious were you about music when that all came through?
Yeah. I loved music, and from when I was a kid, I wanted to be a singer. That's what I used to tell people. And then I obviously grew out of it a little bit, and then I went back to it, and then I grew out when I was in a band at 18, we didn't plan on actually, when I say serious, to answer your question, because at first I thought when I answered that, I was like, yeah, I was totally serious about it. But now when I think back, actually, when we started the band, it was just for fun. It was just to jam in the basement. It was just like, we didn't think we were going to be putting out albums.
I mean, how serious can you be at 18, really?
Exactly. I was still living at home. So I still was not planning on ever touring, for sure. I went to school for photography. Like I wasn't, so we just jammed every like couple of nights a week in one of the guitar players' parents' basement for like the first 2 years before we had our first show, so we didn't even plan on, I don't think we had big expectations for that. If Sub Pop hadn't like offered us a record contract, I don't know that. I mean, we made it done a tour before we were on Sub Pop, but we were just starting like the tour. I don't know. I wouldn't say I was that serious until after, like when that band broke up, and I was like, well, maybe I'll just keep doing music anyway. Like I wasn't planning on it, but I thought, well, I'll try. I don't know. Yeah, at 18, I guess I wasn't that serious. I wasn't like, I'm gonna make it big. I was just like, ooh, I guess maybe I'll keep playing.
It sounds like you got kind of swept up in that, like the heady 90s record label situation, in that sort of, I guess, post Nirvana era, when all these labels were kind of out trying to find the next big thing.
Well, yeah, I think that's what happened. Yes, that was happening because they were like, there was a budget. Like I think Sub Pop was they had already done their deal with Warner, so they had like a pretty big budget for like picking up new bands and artists, and
they leased Nirvana out to Geffen at that point.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, I don't know all the details, the fine details, but that was how I understood it.
How many people in my life I encounter who have been doing the same thing for a living since they were 18? It's not too many. It's doubly funny that it was something that maybe you weren't super serious about to begin with.
Oh gosh, maybe that's why I'm always a mess all the time. Maybe that's not what I was supposed to be doing with my life.
Well, no, I'm obviously not implying that. If anything, like it's probably easier to do it first when you're not serious about it.
Well, it takes the edge off for sure. When you don't feel like you have to have that huge success, or like I was never looking for like a huge commercial success or anything. Like I was just content if 25 people or even 2 people were at my show, depending, because as many musicians and independent or indie, like a lot of people have experienced, we've done many different styles of shows, like in people's living rooms and people's backyards, and then random like shows like where you're playing like somewhere in the US and there's 4 bands on the bill and 10 people are there and they split the door for it. It's like we've all, like so many people have done those shows, and then you're lucky to get, and then you get invited to open and you play in front of lots of people. And then sometimes you headline a tour that was well promoted, and then there's people, and then you headline another tour and there's no one because the shows, nobody knew you were coming. So like there's so many different things that I've experienced, and I'm always grateful for everyone, because sometimes even those shows where there's like 1 or 2 people and you're like, oh, there's 2 people, but you played really well. And maybe one of those people is someone that you went on to like collaborate with down the road. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's all of them, I think are important. Like, I've met people that, it shows that didn't have a lot of people, but then we ended up becoming musical friends. And so I don't know, I have no regrets about that. And I think probably the reason I am still doing it was because I didn't have any pressure on me to like I never did any crazy, like there was no bidding wars over me or anything. Like I didn't have that, like that necessity to bring, like, I didn't have to go into a studio with $100,000 recording budget, like I didn't have to like be pushed into a direction that I didn't want to be pushed or anything, or I just kind of always made each record was the record I wanted to make. And maybe that is why I'm still doing it. I mean, to add to that though, I will admit, like, I mean, it has been 9 years since I put out a solo album. So I would say I've been a little bit more relaxed about it.
There must be moments when, it's like I've been doing this for 20, 25, 30 years and there's like two people in the audience, and that must be incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, well, there was some phases definitely where it would be a little bit frustrating if you didn't have any money or didn't have a credit card. Like some tours like that were really hard. I did after a while, like up until the last Mount Eerie tour, I hadn't toured in the US since like 2010 or 11. So I did take like 8 years off from touring in a place that I didn't have like a huge following in, partly because I didn't have a booking agent. So and also it was really difficult to fund the tours. Sometimes it was hard. Any tour that I've done but there were some great tours too that were just like, okay, that was really cool. So, but I think mostly I didn't go because I just didn't have a booking agent. And when I was no longer on Jaguar, I didn't have anyone, like they would facilitate my work permits as well. And so I honestly just kind of I just kept forgetting to like get a work permit and then so I just didn't even think to go. And then also because my last album was out in 2012 and it was just on a Canadian label, and I didn't have like an American team pushing me to go there. So I kind of just maybe forgot to tour. I was only touring in the territories that I had people like inviting me to come, so that's it was really nice to tour in 2019 with Phil, because it was nice to be back in a lot of the cities where I didn't know, like I think I forget sometimes that I live off this, like that this is my
this is your job.
Yeah, and then I think sometimes I forget, like, oh, I should go tour in that place. And also I have children, so I wasn't like working super hard to try and like tour in every pocket of the continent.
But then you start working with somebody like Phil, who I assume has this like massive network just already in place.
Well, and now I think he has a booking agent, so that makes it even better. And so the shows are really, I toured with him before also when he used to book his own shows, and was always good. So I've never had a bad tour with Phil. So I'm really lucky for that.
Does having kids, does that force you to take it more seriously as a job?
I find now that I'm a little bit older, and so my youngest is 8 right now. And I did find that now, so maybe before I had her, like when my other kids were a little bit older than what she was for, like, I think I was actively planning more tours and seeking out more shows, partly because I needed to be working and because they were older. And so after I had my 4th child, like in 2013, consciously chose to stop touring. I didn't want to put any records for a while. I stopped writing because I wanted to be at home.
You want to be a mom?
Yeah, I wanted to be a full-time mom. I wanted to be home. And so that's why I stopped. And I think that's also partly why I haven't been touring like in the States really a lot, because I thought if I was going to be going away from my children, that I should just make sure that I know there's going to be some people at the shows and not just slug it out the way I did when I was in my 20s and 30s, which I loved. Like, it was great, but it was also hard because I was away from my kids during those tours. And so when you're away from home and you're playing to 10 people, it's different. If I didn't have kids and I was like single and had nothing to be home for, like other than like, regular stuff, then I would have just toured all the time, I think, because I do love touring and I love meeting people. I always stayed at people's houses. It was rare that I had hotel rooms back then. And even still, actually, this situation is a little different because it's not my tour, but maybe there might be hotel rooms in the budget at some point. Yeah, I love all of that. But I finally was like, didn't want to miss out on anything in this, with my last child. Like when she was a baby, I definitely didn't go. I actually did go on my first tour when she was 2 years and 3 months. I went to Switzerland for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And that was really hard and weird. I mean, my other kids, I brought them on tour up until they started going to school. And they were on some of those North American tours where there was like 10 people at shows. So that made it easier to do those ones.
It's always a bit of a misleading, to say like it's been 9 years since the last solo record, because obviously you've collaborations, but is she a part of the reason why it's been 9 years since the last solo record?
Yeah, like when I had her, I decided not to write anymore.
You decide not to write anymore?
At first, yeah, like she was born in 2013 and I didn't write any songs till 2016. And even in 2016, I only wrote 2 that are on the album. And then I started writing a lot more. That's not totally accurate because I did do a collaboration called Julie and the Wrong Guys that came out in 2017.
It was a rock record.
Yeah, and we wrote that album together in Manitoba. So I did go there and write all the lyrics except maybe one song we wrote together because I was like lyrically drained after being a week trying to write lyrics. But so yeah, I did write in 2016 a little more than just 2 songs for that. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes I tend to forget some of the stuff that I've worked on. Yeah. So no, I had decided that I needed a break from all that. And so I chose to make sure that I didn't write for a while. And then finally once I started, like in 2017, I really started writing and then it just kind of all started coming out, so maybe the break was a good idea. And I'm still writing pretty regularly now even. So I don't know if that's because of our current situation or because I just have more coming out because I took such a break. I don't know. But yeah, I have been, it is maybe, even though there hasn't been a solo Julie Doiron album out, or sorry, I should say it's not even really a solo album, but an album under the name Julie Doiron out in 9 years. I still have been pretty busy, like touring. I tour Europe almost every year. I was touring Mount Eerie. I still tour Canada a lot or do lots of, usually if somebody invites me to go do a show, I usually say yes if it's feasible.
I obviously talked to a lot of musicians for the podcast. I don't remember anyone ever telling me that they made a conscious decision to stop writing.
Well, I had a newborn, so
sure. I mean, but it's like, it's one thing to say, I'm not going to tour, I'm not going to put out an album, but if for a lot of people, writing is just something that you not only can continue to do, but like can't shut off. Yeah,
like I think I just was like, I didn't know what I wanted to write about or what I wanted to say anymore, and so I think I just decided that I shouldn't try at that point and just like not force it. And I decided that it would be better if I just didn't. And it took the edge off of that feeling that you have to do it. Or usually you're right. Like usually sometimes if let's say I have a dry spell, like for a month or 2 where nothing is inspiring me to write, then sometimes I do just kind of pop out of that with like songs just shooting out, like, and it's, so yeah, there is sometimes this like urge or desire or need to write. But I will say, I think I'm pretty sure I chose to just stop writing at that point.
The Mount Eerie stuff, that was all Phil?
Yeah. I don't collaborate on songwriting. He never asked me to collaborate on that. Although we have talked about collaborating in the future musically, but I still don't even think I would be songwriting.
Obviously the band project that you mentioned before, that sounds like it was collaborative and that you were writing lyrics for their music, but as a rule you generally aren't very collaborative in the songwriting aspect.
Yeah, so that was my first time songwriting with people, and I was terrified, and they were my friends, like we started playing together in 2013, or we did a show together. It was like an unlikely fit. It was like, it was a festival, and then the person doing the festival was like, how about if you play with these guys as your backing band? And it was like 2 members of a band called the Cancer Bats, who are like a metal kind of hardcore band, and then my friend Eamon on guitar, and Eamon McGrath. It seemed like the kind of thing like, oh, that's so wild, it just might work kind of idea, so then we played together, and it was super fun and really great. And then we made like a 45 or 7-inch. And then the drummer like applied for funding for us to make a full length, and we got the funding. And so when he reached out to me, he said, so we got this funding and we think that we should get together for a week in my grandparents' cottage in Manitoba, and then we'll record it in Manitoba because the funding was through that province and stuff. And then but I was like, I don't have any songs. I haven't been writing. Like, I don't have, he's like, it's cool. We're going to get together and we're going to write it together, and they had been working on music, and we did use like 2 of my older songs that I had written already. But so, yeah, I was terrified, and he just made it seem like it was going to be so relaxed. Like, and they were so supportive. Like in the morning they would make breakfast. I would do yoga. I'd walk down to the lake sometimes I wrote songs in 5 minutes, like the music as well, like certain ones. Sometimes after I would like breakfast or do yoga, I would go like write lyrics in the room. Sometimes we would jam and they would just kind of come out. And I was really, really happy about that because it was so positive. And so this record that I mentioned that I made with my partner, which we did in April last year, it was a similar thing where he would wake up in the morning and he'd start, make coffee, and then he'd start recording just music. And then he would be like, hey, okay, so can you write the lyrics for this one? And I'd be like, okay, guys, so I'll have a bath. And so I'd go in the bathtub and write the lyrics. Like I do the bathtub is a kind of important place for me. Like I do a lot of lyric writing in the bath or in the woods or either out on a walk or a bike ride or in the bathtub, seemingly.
You mentioned that record was done in a cottage, and I know the new record, the solo record, was recorded in a cabin in the woods.
Well, I might have to change that because I don't think it's so much a cabin. I don't remember saying it was a cabin, so maybe it got misunderstood, but it was definitely a house in the woods. A house near the woods.
I don't know what the sort of delineating factor is there.
I know, I gotta look into that bio.
Yeah, it wasn't like an Abraham Lincoln situation though. That seems to be a theme, at least recently for you, and when it comes to either writing the lyrics or recording an album, to send yourself off into the woods.
Well, yeah, and also the Julie and Danny record that I was talking about that we just did, that is also recorded in our house, so which is basically in the woods.
So you could not be in the woods if you wanted to.
Yeah, but I mean, I walk out there every day in our yard, and it's like the crown land is like the trees are right behind our yard, so it doesn't take much for me to get out there. But I usually go walk on trails that are nearby because I'm a little bit nervous in the woods behind our house because there's like a lot of animals back there that I'm afraid to run into. Like I don't want to run into one that can kill me, for example.
Sure, you get some bears up there, I assume.
Yeah, and the coyotes are really only at night, so I don't have to worry about. I
remember the first time I saw a coyote in person, and they're small dogs. They're not super intimidating on their own.
But I think they move around in packs.
You described Phil's voice as sounding like wood or sounding like a tree.
That's what it feels like for me.
Yeah. But that's another way that your music keeps bringing you back to the forest.
It's true. Actually, that's a good point. That's interesting because usually I am most inspired when I'm near the water, like when I'm swimming or but a lot of the times I'm swimming in a lake that's surrounded by woods. So I guess it works still.
Is a bath like a microcosm of that?
I think, yeah, in my bath, I just pretend the shower curtain is trees, I guess.
You're also in a very small body of water.
Yeah, but I make it really warm though. So that's the only difference, I guess.
It sounded like the pandemic was a big part of you writing this record.
Well, the newest, the Julie Doiron record?
Yeah, or were you're referring to the EP?
Well, the Julie Doiron one was actually recorded just before the pandemic. So that one.
So this is like way old hat for you to be talking about it now.
Yeah, but it's because it's just coming out now. So it's like we still want to talk. I still want to talk about it. But it was recorded in February 2020, just before. It was supposed to come out in September last year.
It was shelved because of the pandemic.
We shelved it by choice, but then we got to the point where we're like, okay, we should just put it out. Like
this fucking thing is never going to end.
It did start to feel like, why are we waiting any longer? It's like, yeah, it's clear that we're not going to be able to tour the same way for a long time. So because at first everybody was like, oh, well, we'll wait. A lot of bands did this and artists did this. We'll wait until we can actually tour for it. But then I think when people realized it was obvious that it wasn't just going to be a few months, and it made sense to start releasing things again. And so but the pandemic and the isolations, because in the province I live in, we had very strict rules, and our border was closed to all the other provinces in Canada. But also, at one point when the cases were low, they formed a bubble with the other maritime provinces, but still people coming from the west of our province, they couldn't get in, like no one from Quebec or anyone. So, and it opened up occasionally when the cases were good to people with second residences. So my boyfriend could come in then. They loosened the rules sometimes. So, but when he would come, we'd have to isolate for 14 days each time in our house. So we spent we had 7 isolation periods. So there was a lot of time to write and a lot of, and I guess I had just, I don't know, for some reason I was inspired, and I don't know why. I've never understood where songs come from. I don't understand how they just work their way out, and I have no idea, and I'm very grateful for it, but I don't even understand it.
I found that everybody I've talked to, it's one or the other. The pandemic, either they're more prolific than they've ever been, or it's just completely dried up.
Yeah, I would fall into the more prolific. I'm more prolific than I've been. Yeah.
Is it going to be another 9 years before we get another one?
No. Well, no, because I'm already writing. Like, I already have like 8 new songs, and then I've got like these like 3 new French songs in the works. And so I have a feeling, unfortunately, it might be like I don't want to saturate my market, but I think there will be a few records out in the next little bit. Yeah.
I don't think you're at risk for oversaturation at this point in your career.
Yeah, it's okay. And you know what? What does it really matter? I mean, it doesn't really matter if I think about like whether I put out too many or not enough records in the whole grand scheme of like what's going on in the world. That's beyond like it's okay if I like, I don't have to put out a record.
I think putting out music that brings people joy can only be a good thing in the end.
I think that's a really great way to see that. And it's really because I was struggling this year where I was like, especially like on the days where I was watching or listening to Democracy Now! Every day for like 3 months.
I had to stop listening to her at a certain point. It was too much. I
had to stop too. I was like crying all the time and just be like, why are we making music? There's nothing like.
You're not even an American either. And it's just, you're just hearing about all the horrible shit that we're doing over here.
But it was also hearing about everything going on in the world and having it like, and being like more aware of it than ever because we were in lockdown, we had time to actually gather information and be aware of what was going on, and I think which was a good thing, I think, to learn.
It was, but this is what you're talking about your head being too full and not full enough. I mean, I was thinking about this, that like that's what your head is full of. It's full of all the news. It's full of unactionable things,
right? And I really struggled with that, and where I'd be walking in the woods and just crying because I would be in this moment where I'd be like, what's the point anymore? Like, I was having those kinds of where I was just like, I don't know what to do to help. I don't know how to there's nothing like I was really feeling like putting so much weight on my shoulders of actions that with stuff that I couldn't change directly, or like, I was just feeling so anxious all the time, not knowing what to do or how to proceed, and crying all the time for a while. And I just had to take a break and try to learn. And so then realizing that, yes, a lot of people like listening to music, and if that can help, then that's good, and that seems to be like my only skill. So I mean, I have other skills, but I don't know what
That's your most marketable skill.
That's the one I'm most known for, let's say.